for it to be recorded. There you go. Hanging on the call is your consent. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining. For those that were here last month, I gave us a little bit of homework, which hopefully should mean this is more of an open conversation with multiple people chipping in. So the two things I'd like us to get into and share on this Atlassian Marketplace Roundtable session is activation. So that was the main thing that came up last time that I think deserved a bit of a deeper dive on. So I asked people to provide examples of apps inside or outside the Atlassian ecosystem that provided good activation. For those not familiar, at the very bottom of the funnel when you've got someone evaluating your app or even buying, getting that wow factor during the first few minutes can be absolutely crucial to ensuring you don't have a leaky funnel. You can do a lot of work marketing, and if at the end they try your app, they don't understand how it works, and they leave unimpressed, you really have wasted a lot of time. So I think the major problem we've all agreed with was that people, the first thing they do when they open an app is the wizard pops up, and then they close that and then go, right, how does this app work? So yeah, enough from me. Did anyone do their homework? Has anyone got an example of an app that provides excellent activation that we should look to emulate? All right, let me lower the bar a
I,
little bit. Gabe, you got something?
I mean, I wanted someone else to share their homework, but if no one else will, then I sure can mention something. I mean, I more of have an idea of how it should look like and kind of like thoughts to share. But if you want an example, then this is something we did at my previous employer. So we did that with Big Picture, and this is not something that was initially in the product. This is something we kind of thought out as a sales team regarding, after listening into how people actually start with the app, and we kind of made a little change there. So the thing is, with products that are highly customizable, you often try to sell the customizability and all the different options and how it can be tailor-made exactly for you, right? The problem is then people open this product and there is nothing in it. There is just a shitload of cogs to turn and options to change to have it actually designed for you, but there is nothing there. So before you start using the product, you need to go through all of these introductions. So what we actually did is we did a bunch of fake data that was there in the product to get you started. So when you open the product, instead of having an empty canvas that you could start filling in, there was already some like fake projects that it is a Jira product as well. So it was filled in with some data that was created automatically when you installed the product. It created some new projects for you and some tasks that were used as samples and examples. So using that, you could kind of start mingling around with those sample projects and see how everything is working. So essentially my idea is that for those highly customizable products, we should have some ready templates that are welcoming you when you open the product, something that you can already work with touch instead of just leaving you with an empty field. So yeah.
Yeah, and maybe to build on what Gabe said, that's one of the ideas we're discussing internally right now at Old Street, to offer this kind of service or help to the customers and try to, for example, in our case, prepare templates, reports templates that they could be using. Because again, as Gabe said, you got the empty quote unquote tool, and very often it's much easier for the customer to have like a ready templates or something they could start with, or get the service that would get them a bespoke templates, or get them started basically with your tool.
Thanks. Yes. Thanks. So, yeah, Craig, I know you had some thoughts on it last time. Maybe if I don't tee it up as strictly as have you done your homework, you might be less shy about talking and sharing some good apps that handle activation well. But Craig's got no mic. Okay, so does anyone have some examples of apps that do activation well they'd like to share? Don't be shy. There you go. Hi, Stefan.
Hi there.
And hi, Brian.
Yeah, for me, it's for us, it's kind of the holy grail has always been automation for Jira. They had the external playground to boot, so we could even explore the concepts outside of the app, and it also delivers right when you install it. There's already something pre-configured that you can easily explore, and it's a bit advanced. But for people that are already kind of know what they are looking for in terms of I want to automate the product, that's kind of the for me the best example, which we are trying to emulate a bit. And the shorter version for me is usually really just to skip the wizard that you mentioned in favor of a one-click example. I mean, that's really difficult to achieve depending on the app, but you can actually say, so we are doing AWS integrations, and there is one pass, for example, you can click a CloudFormation stack that does something, that pre-configures something in your account, an example setup. And that is enough for our scenario. If you can pull that off to say you really just have to click this, it navigates to your, in this case, to your AWS console, configures automatically stuff. And then the result of this example will automatically show up in the app. Of course, this also has a precondition that people already know that what they're looking for, and that CloudFormation in this case for AWS is a vehicle to do these kind of things.
Thanks very much for that, Stefan. Brilliant. Yeah, I agree with the use of Playground, and I think tying together what you and Gabe said, take what you've learned from a Playground on your website and also apply it to when people first get the app up and running, right? If that needs to be pre-populated data or whatever, so that there's something for them to do. Yeah, because as we all know, people don't do the wizard. Brian, you seemed ready.
Yeah, I definitely, excuse me, didn't do my homework, but to help kind of contribute, I'd like to shape the question a little bit. I thought, I mean, all three of these examples were great to get your mind going, but then how do you present that? So is that just like you open the app and the paperclip comes up and says like, oh, I can help you build a XYZ? Because a lot of people, you know, at least in my personal experience, they might not want the tutorial right away. You know, they have a new product, they have a new toy, they want to jump in and, you know, build their own, you know, whatever. And then they hit their block. So then, you know, how do you find when to engage them? Do you have, like Stefan was saying, a one click where, you know, you can maybe go to a sandbox or a playground and explore it with the pre-configured data? So I guess outside of the example of when you load it, everything is automated and configured for you with an example. Once they get out of that, you know, how do you engage somebody? When do you engage somebody? And, you know, with what kind of content? Do you do it with 101, you know, this is how, you know, you tie your shoes, or are you going a little deeper to that?
It is an excellent question. My 3-month-old has just started shouting at me, so that's why I remained on mute. Sorry. I think it's a big question. Something I've seen done really well is, rather than a big wizard at the start, like when you open up a new feature for the first time, that's when it just tells you. So it really does divide the information into small pieces as and when you need it, right? And a lot of it, you know, where does that information come? As you beautifully alluded to, if it is the Microsoft Clippy paperclip, people will look for the kill button, start pressing Control-Alt-Delete. So something that's much less obtrusive to the experience is something like tooltips, and we found, you know, you can have if you're hovering over something for a few seconds with the mouse, it doesn't have to pop up immediately, but like after a second, which is a long time in UX, can be enough time to explain what that button does. Also, the first time we use an app, it'll like, even though it's not a wizard, it'll take you through. So the first menu is sort of like highlighted, as in everything else is grayed out, and then you pick a selection there, and then the second one's highlighted. And likewise, when you can do it, so it's the first time you're making a new chart, that process happens.
Yeah, kind of like that. Isn't that what's usually, or at least what I hear is this is kind of the tour concept, the onboarding tour, where you can opt in, you get this offer. Atlassian has this pattern also in their design guides, I think. You get the offer, but you can skip it. You can always reactivate it if you want to with a small button. And I find this very helpful usually, and not very intrusive, as long as you can really just skip it if you need to. So that's this built-in skip the wizard thing, but you have this, you know that it's augmented, it's always in the back as an option to refocus maybe some tip here and there. To be honest, usually the tips are way too weak, I think. So it's not, but it's the right concept for me.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. The ability to skip, and then it reminds me of whenever I cook, right? The first thing you do is throw the instructions in the bin. And then the second thing you do is read the instructions in the bin. Let's try and squint down. And, okay, so yes, you should be able to turn off the tooltip, and then having the button to be able to turn it back on as well would be brilliant too. Does anyone else have any other examples of apps that did good activation in or outside of the Atlassian space? Okay, then I think we'll move on. So the other topic that people are requested to deep dive on is, during an evaluation, how to get in touch with the people that are actually using the tool. So this is a problem we're probably all familiar with. There's an officially assigned Jira admin. They get 1,000 spam emails because they're always the person. In fact, nowadays it's normally a "don't spam me" at domain email because they're used to it. So yeah, how do you get in touch with the end users during an evaluation? So I've brought along my sales team who have some tips on some things they've done. But before that, like, I presume this is a problem everyone's dealt with. Does anyone have any thoughts, feelings, or just want to vent about how frustrating the whole process is?
So frustrating. Yeah, I mean, I think we're all in the same boat here. Just not having that direct contact is just really a game changer when it comes to marketing, because obviously we want that feedback, we want those insights. To be honest, that first contact that we can actually look at and be successful with, we got to be in touch with our support team. Like, a lot of that contact comes through support. Ideally, it's such a bad way to get in touch with your customer base, because you don't want to be like, oh, the only way I can find out who my customer is if they have a problem. Like, it's so backwards. But we do put a huge emphasis on support, and like actually marketing and support has like pretty good feedback loops going. And one of the things that we definitely do is if somebody's, solving a support query, they will give them the option being like, hey, I noticed that you're an end user of the product. Do you want to be added to our product news list so that we can send them things like updates or, like invitations to a webinar or something like that? If they say no, they say no, but it does end up being like a pretty good, like option for them. At least then we know, okay, this person is the end user and we might not have that email address. And then we get that direct consent to be able to stay in contact. It's not a perfect system, but it is one of the ways that we do that.
Yeah, for us, it's one of the more successful channels as well. We even have a button in the app, get help, and one of the options is to raise a support ticket. And very often people ask, oh, how can I do this? How can I do this report on this chart? So very often it's not only reporting bugs, but asking for help, which is a great conversation starter.
Yeah, so that kind of ties into our previous topic of discussion, right? So you make a terrible UI, people bother your support team about how to get things done, and boom, you are in touch with them suddenly. So that's the tactic.
So you think we should intentionally make a bad UX?
Remove the tooltips. They will come for tooltips.
I think that requires an app that is really in high demand by the customers in the first place. So they
Yes,
really
of
need
course.
it.
I'm just joking.
It's going to be
But to be honest, I'm just joking, of course. But to be honest, it is kind of those people that will actually reach out to you with a simple question during an evaluation. You should like keep a very close look at those, because those are people that are actually engaged enough to ask you a question to get actually, get mad at the product instead of being like, okay, screw this, I cannot use this, so I will try something else, right? If they are at the point of actually contacting you, you should focus on those people, because those will be your most probable conversions anyway.
Yeah, you can turn them into your best friends or your worst enemies.
And a lot of the times, if it's like an interesting use case, we will even send it over. Like I know support will kind of push them in different directions, like to either the PMs, or we have like a user experience person on our team. She kind of like works across all the different teams, but we'll send them in like her direction and actually like offer a real session. So it's like if we know that they're in the evaluation period, even if they haven't requested a demo, we will just offer it. Say, hey, are you interested in something like an onboarding session? Just to make sure that there's even more face-to-face contact, to try to make sure that that conversion really happens. And then we also get the feedback about what they're trying to do.
And very often that's the best way of getting future feature ideas. Most of our backlog is what people requested, like, oh, by the way, I would like to have this. And yeah, very often is a great feature idea. We just add it to our backlog.
Yeah, and it doesn't always have to be a complicated feature that takes months of development. Sometimes it's just like we discussed templates earlier, right? If it's an easy to make report that people are having to click a few times, but we get asked the question a lot, then yeah, we can just have that as one of the standard templates. Brian, you nearly went to speak, but got interrupted.
No, I was just clearing my throat.
You unmuted to clear your throat?
I want you to know that I'm engaged with you guys.
I'm glad. Active listening. Boris has just joined. Boris, do you have any examples of apps that show good activation?
I would say probably maybe the easy agile ones are pretty good in terms of once you get into those. Yeah, it's activation, I think, is something we've thought about in our apps, and I think Atlassian has this typical problem of like buyer versus user, and admin versus user. And so it's very difficult to activate appropriately for non-admin facing apps, because really, I think in many ways, the activation is like have somebody install and then throw them some kind of UI to ingest other people into it, right? Like, can they then put in the name of the person who requested the app so that that person gets an email with the right onboarding steps or an in-app something? I don't have a good answer there. Sorry.
Yeah, fair. As I said, our last call, I think the best thing we found is to keep our email sequences very focused on enablement tips and be like, please forward this to the person who requested the trial, which from the statistics we can see is happening. It's definitely improved our open and click rates on our email sequences, so there's some glimmer of hope there.
Back to the easy agile example is actually very good. I was personally intrigued. I'm rarely jumping on this, but I really like how they, on the first screen, they actually had an in-product video where one of the team members kind of thanked for installing the app and kind of conveyed how valuable the feedback will be for them, and that they hope that users will engage. And I found that very appealing, which is, I notice, kind of rare that I'm not a video watcher usually, but this like 45 seconds or something. Of course, you could skip it, but it was very personal and felt very engaging to me. So I think I've noted as a very good idea. And that's per user, I think. So every user that opens an app screen will see this first automatically.
That's very helpful. Thank you. So yeah, as I said, the other main topic for today, Jacek, if you can maybe start the ball rolling on how you get in touch with the end user during an evaluation, how you get past the gatekeeper, how you find the appropriate person. Any tips or tricks on that? And there's a few people lurking quietly. We'd love to hear from you as well.
Yeah, so first of all, let maybe continue the topic of email sequences. So we were trying different things, and what we're doing right now and where we have the best results is to make it very simple. So first of all, I like the idea of even forgetting that you are on evaluation. So rather than saying, oh, this is like a trial or whatever, we just start, this is the onboarding process, you have a new tool. So straight away, it feels like, all right, I got this tool already, and this is the onboarding. And it feels like I already have the tool from the user perspective. And we tend to keep it very simple. I believe that people don't read a lot. Like if you send an email with, 15 sentences, nobody will read it. I don't think people will even open it. So we keep it very short. All the emails, we have around 5-6 emails in a sequence, and we try to engage people as much as we can. We add links to YouTube videos, like Stefan was saying, so they can, instead of going for the documentation, they have an option to go to YouTube and watch a 5-minute video that will show them everything to get them started with the tool. So yeah, just to summarize with the email sequences, first of all, it's a true onboarding. It feels like you already have the tool. It's not only the evaluation. We keep it very simple. Less words, the better. And we analyze every single word, like, oh, do we really need that word? Can we replace it with something better or not? And then keep it interesting with like YouTube videos, links to YouTube, etc. So people can, get the short version of the demo within 5 minutes. They can get started with the tool. Do you guys have any other experience with email sequences, or how is it working for you?
I mean, I can go again. So most of our big apps have like a 3-touch series. But like you said, obviously try to keep them as short as possible. And our biggest emphasis is, either sending them to something like a crash course video or directly to some kind of page in the documentation. But I mean, it's a sad thing to admit as like a marketer, but there is this side of, we have to assume that not everybody's going to open the email, and even those who open the email are not going to be the right people. So I mean, this is where documentation becomes kind of the most important part of that onboarding experience is, having that documentation available, because if that person then goes and like Googles something, hopefully there's a documentation article that's already coming up. But yeah, I mean, even going one step further, the best place is to obviously have that material or those answers or that support directly in the product. And that also goes back to the topic of activation. But yeah, if it's not in the product, then hopefully you have it somewhere on the internet where the person can go and look for it. And the email series is great for, kind of encouraging people, kind of even this reminder of, oh wait, I did install that app. I haven't gone through everything or totally evaluated it. But then, making sure that it's also really obvious. If they're having any problems, here's the link to support, or here's an email, right? Like some way that they can just get in contact really easily. But email is good, but I don't think it's everything.
I think there's a crucial point now, that SEO, even for documentation, because people often don't want a meeting or a chat with your support team, let alone your sales team. And yes, if ideally, if they can't find it from looking at the app immediately, and they don't always find the link to your documentation, often people do Google even to check the spelling of a word. So if you put a bit of SEO thought, and that's what I often find, is that your blog's written by your marketing team and your documentation is written by your product team. And if you don't have that overlap, bridge that gap, you're going to end up with unoptimized documentation. And although, you know, I'm not a fan of SEO hacks so much that the thing becomes unreadable, you definitely need to make sure that you're optimizing for the right things, so that, as you say, when people type in, how do I do this with this app? They find your documentation, and your documentation works. I think so. Confluence is okay from an SEO perspective, right? Like, I certainly find Confluence pages quite often when people use it as an external knowledge base. So yeah, go for it, mate.
I think that's a very important point, because like back in the day, every second email we were sending was basically something, let's jump on a call, let's set up a demo. And now the idea is that even if this person will never talk to us, they will get all the important information to start using the tool. They watch the YouTube video, they have easy access to documentation, they can raise support tickets, etc., etc. So it's kind of more self-serve, but if they want like personalized call, that they can easily request one and book it straight away.
Yeah, and often it's like, if you ask for a call too early, you'll scare them away. But it starts with the support ticket, and then when they describe the problem in the support ticket, you're like, "That sounds really interesting. I'd like to would you mind sharing your screen and showing that?" And then you're inviting them to share their screen, and then before you know it, whoops, they're on a call. So.
I always like to compare it to boiling a frog or the seafood or whatever. Like, you start with cold water and then you slowly increase the temperature, rather than starting with a boiling hot water.
At the other end of the spectrum, I think for these bigger companies where you rarely know who the end user is, someone evaluating your tool is the best time to reach out to someone senior at that company cold on LinkedIn, for example, right? So if you're reaching out to someone cold with a connection request on LinkedIn, that rarely goes well these days, unless you have an in and your company is trying my app. I'd love to pick your brains and get some feedback. I don't know, Jacek, do you have any success with that these days, or is that ship sailed?
That's complicated. It sometimes works, but nowadays with the LinkedIn automated messages, it's more and more difficult. Yes, definitely you stand out if you do that, but it's less useful than it was before, but we still see some success with that. Very often the problem is that this like more senior person is too senior for that. So sometimes you can, just hit the right spot, and yeah, this person will be super interested in this topic, or Jira reporting or whatever. But very often that person will tell you like, I have no idea about that, talk to the person that's actually evaluating. So
what I found, rather than pure cold, is if you have a connection already at that company and you've had a conversation or went to an event or whatever, that is a reasonable time to reach out and say, do you know who it is who's evaluating our tool at the moment? And we've had some good introductions that way, with some, reaching out to a connection who we have some communication with in the past and saying, oh, your company's trying my app, and they can find out internally who it is and who the point of contact is. And you can ask them if they have any questions, please refer them to me. So I found that's a nice in.
What was really successful for us, like very often, especially with like bigger prospects that, let's say, have offices in multiple countries. Let's say a Samsung, we got Samsung in Germany evaluating our apps, and then we're reaching out to Samsung in other countries. And very often we had the situation when we had, people from one company, but on different instances from different countries. And that was a great way of expanding, putting your foot in the door at the same company, the same prospect, but in a different country, very often on a different instance. So that was, we had a lot of success with that.
Has anyone else tried some weird things?
Just a follow-up question for Jack. That's also something that I'm looking at doing right now. Did you, I mean, just to simplify the terms, did you reach out cold to other places, or did you ask for an introduction, or how about did you go throughout, just going through different countries of the same company?
It's both. Sometimes, I ask for introduction, but very often, to be honest, in most of the cases, we just reach out cold on LinkedIn, send connection request with a short message. Again, the shorter, the better. Like, person X from this country is, in touch with us. We have discussion about this app or this software, whatever. I like to loop you into conversation. That was, I think, the most successful sentence we had. Like, I just want to loop you into the conversation. We already having conversation with your company, with this person. You can drop the name of your contact, and it just looks more legit from their perspective. Like, oh, they already in touch with us in some other country, and there is big chance they have the same issue, the same pain point, and they may use the same app on their instance, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, is that you don't have to make it a blocker. So you can ask for an introduction, and that might come, but you can also reach out cold in the meantime and see.
And very often these people don't know each other, like people working for Samsung or some big banks, they don't know people on the other floor, right? And what about people working in different countries? So very often it have to be cold because they don't even know each other.
So do I get this correctly? Do you think that's kind of a social proof thing? If you mention a colleague in the same company, even though they don't know anything about the other department?
Yes,
maybe?
and that they can also usually they can check it internally or on LinkedIn, and that's what makes you stand out from all the automated LinkedIn messages.
Okay.
Like, this company is in touch with our branch in this country. They can check on LinkedIn the name of your contact, and they can check that actually this person works for this company, and the reply rate is way better than just going purely cold. I would not call it cold anymore. I mean, it's cold with that person, but it's kind of expanding your connections within the same prospect.
Thanks.
And we can see, like we had some customers that having multiple instances of Jira. I think the most extreme one was with like 20. So yeah, there is a big potential with that.
Any more questions or comments on that? I might hand over to Gabe. Gabe, what was your process at a software plant? How did you come in cold from an evaluation? Was it mostly support driven? What was the game plan? You are on mute.
So yeah, I am. Sorry. Yeah, it was mostly support driven. So we started most of our conversations from, as I said, from customers that had some kind of a issue that they kind of moved on from. And from there, we usually try to get them on a call as fast as possible. And how we solve this call is how much as Jacek said, basically we sold it as we're giving you something for free, right? We will configure it for you by ourselves by having a consultant on the call. And from there, it was usually pretty easy to fill out the situation, right? Who's the decision maker? Are we talking with just some guy that was tasked with configuring that? So basically just depending on who we met on that call, we changed the whole process, right? Do we actually talk to the person that is that reached out to us through support, or do we actually ask how else can we help, and is there anyone else interested in this particular product? Like, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? And then we kind of offered help in that matter that eventually led to selling the product. The main thing in the whole process was always, and I will keep mentioning, as this is one of the most important things, is just to make sure that they will be using the tool, right? So no matter if you will give it to them for free, no matter how much of actual free support you will give out to them, or actually give the product for free for some more time, the most important thing is that to ensure that they are actually using it. As long as they are using it, there is probably some processes being formed, and the longer they use it, the higher is the chance that they will be more in depth into the conversation with you as well.
And what's also interesting, what we're trying to do more right now is to attract people to come to us, not only via support tickets, but on social media. So we, rather than talking about us and our apps on LinkedIn, we starting to mention other people, other people's blogs, some interesting content in general, and try to spark a conversation on LinkedIn. And when you just share interesting content and share other people's work and blogs and useful tools or apps, then you just gather more people around you, and they see your LinkedIn, they see where you work, and you just have more and more people who reach out to you. And it's a big shift we're going for right now. In the bottom line, don't talk about just yourself and how great you are and how great your apps are, but just try to be more interesting and spark conversations. And then when you have a lot of people around you on LinkedIn, that they will see your software as well, obviously. And the trap here is that very often we were looking at our LinkedIn posts and we were like, oh, we got like 10, 20, 50 likes, but it was very often the same bubble of people, like a bunch of our partners, a bunch of our friends. And you can be like, oh, I got 40 likes, but when you go one by one, it's like all the same people all the time. So it doesn't really work. But if you try to, share other people's work, comment on it, write a couple of sentences, have some call to action, try to spark the conversation, maybe tag a bunch of people, that's a more effective way of getting into new circles and new bubbles on LinkedIn, people that never seen you before.
Thanks. Yes. Just out of interest, does that sound way too salesy for people? Is that terrifying the marketing people in the room?
I don't think it's salesy at all. Yeah. I think it's a great strategy, a strategy that kind of takes some time to build up, get that content. And it takes, I would guess that you guys probably have someone dedicated or very highly involved in social media to monitor that, to find all that stuff. A pitfall that we sometimes fall in is social media can be put on the back burner at times. And it's done because we need to do it versus, having that thought leadership, which is, I don't think it's salesy at all. I actually think it's quite the opposite of, getting that inbound quality material where people are coming to you to complement all of the sales stuff we already spoke about.
Yeah, interesting thought. We don't actually have a dedicated person on it, and it's precisely because I think too often there's like someone writing a technical blog and then someone tweeting about it, and the dots don't join up, right? So what we've sort of done, and again, this is newish, is divide each person by an area of specialty. So Jasek's going to be focused on data visualization. And as he's learning that and reading books about it, he'll be mentioning the author and some other people who are interested in that space and sharing that. And so like building that deep knowledge and building those connections in that micro niche that targets a certain use case of our app. So we've sort of done it like that way. So each person is responsible for, we churn out blogs about all different topics. And if it relates to that's about data visualization, Jacek, over to you. Write a LinkedIn post about that. If it's about agile planning, okay, Gabe, that's your area. So we're trying not to just put it to as often gets done, the marketing intern, right? Like, hey, tweet about the thing we did.
So then do you guys still have like a gatekeeper who handles all of this and herds all the cats, or do you have like
You
just
let the
everyone
cats
has
run
the password?
free.
Yeah.
Well, no, so that's the point. 1Password. I'm not a big fan of company social media accounts. I think there's examples where it's done well. Wendy's, right? But generally, people follow people, and I don't know how easy this is to do, but most of us, are quite senior in our companies and planning on sticking around for a while. I think there's a lot of strength in leveraging a personal social media account. So I get more engagement on my LinkedIn than I'd expect Old Street Solutions, the company corporate page, to ever get. Likewise, one of the first things we did was hijack our technical co-founder's account, Tom's. So he hasn't had access to his LinkedIn for a year. It's just ours. We use it as a marketing channel for the nerdier stuff. So yeah, I know. I understand why people want.
Chris, is this your marketing strategy or is this your employee retention strategy so they can't talk to recruiters?
I guess it's
It's both.
genius. But
You can't escape recruiters. They will reach out to you no matter what.
but yeah, I think I don't know, like the company LinkedIn page will always suffer from what Jacek was describing earlier. The same 20 people who like it, who are your fans anyway. You won't drive new contacts, new demand generation rather than demand capture with a company page. I think it just doesn't work, especially in a niche as targeted as ours. You're sort of reaching out to an Atlassian evangelist at a certain company, and by the time they're following your company page, they already know you and your products and what you're about. Otherwise, they wouldn't. So I just find the personal LinkedIn pages, especially if the co-founders, like the senior team, just resonates a lot better with people.
Yeah, in terms of likes and engagement in general, I think in our case, there is a big difference between the Old Street Solutions on LinkedIn and like people. Sometimes I log in and I see all the data and the stats, and it's not great, the company page.
I just use the Old Street Solutions LinkedIn page for our like greatest hits posts that ever. Sorry, our greatest hits posts that have come from the personal pages. As Craig said, people buy from people, but I think when people might check your company page is if like a big bank or procurement team is checking out how legit is this company, and that's one of the things that we'll check. And that's why my personal account, I can get away with quite an informal style, and then the company page is fairly boring because it's for that, right? It's for someone to check, is this company legit? Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, I totally agree that I don't know. We post on social media, but it's very much just like, hey, we're K15TD, here's like our latest news, right? Like whatever's kind of coming out of the company. We actually don't put a ton of time or energy looking at the metrics there because it's just not, we know it's not lead driving activities for us. But what we do put, and I can say this personally, we put a ton of time and effort into like community building and community engagement. And that could be in something like a LinkedIn group, but we like actively go out and search for these, whether it's a Slack community or like, I don't know, I'm trying to think, probably our biggest one where we're really, really well known is a group called Write the Docs. And it's kind of a community of technical writers. And within that subset, it is a pretty niche area. Within that subset, there are people who are using Confluence. And I don't know, I'm sure some of you already know him, but Matt Reiner, he is like huge in that niche. And a lot of it came from a very organic place. Like we don't try to go in there and be like, buy this app, buy this app. Like we actually spend a lot of time answering questions that have nothing to do with us. Like, and that's not just Matt, that is our product managers jump in from time to time. We've got some of our developers going in. Somebody was trying to wrestle with the native PDF exporter a couple of weeks ago, and one of our guys was in there being like, hey, have you tried XYZ? We could very easily be like, hey, go buy our PDF exporter, but that's not going to solve their problem, it's also not going to kind of build that trust. So I think if you have the time and the resources and the energy, go identify those communities. It might be in a social media channel for sure. Those are out there, but like look elsewhere as well. Like try to figure out who are your target roles for your apps. What do they care about? Where do they hang out? Where do they get information from one another? Where do they go to ask questions like, hey, I'm trying to do this thing. What tool would you use? Go find those places and just kind of spend some time monitoring them. And when it makes sense, jump in. And I think that's like a great way to build kind of this organic trust. And it's worked really, really well for us. But what I can say is that's taken years. Like that really isn't something that happens overnight.
It's interesting. I think we kind of started our app portfolio based on this because I was active on Stack Overflow with AWS topics and had a lot of contacts then, but I kind of dropped off this due to making this a full-time business. And so I lost this touch. I mean, I'm still visible there, but I'm not actively engaged anymore though. And it's very daunting to think about having to do this again because it was very time intensive. So it's but a good point as well noted.
Yeah, what we found, and this is probably where Brian's dedicated person comes in, it is fine to have someone go through those things, and sometimes like they'll see a question, it's like, oh, is our app the answer to that question? And probably the junior business development person doing that, you don't want answering the question, but they can post it in Slack, get a consultant to write a thoughtful answer. Maybe our app's not the answer. Maybe you want to consider this, or potentially look at our app, right? And so that way we're sort of curating the best content, because as you say, it's a lot of time for someone such as yourself these days to scour the forums.
We never use it, but I think at my previous employer, they used to use software tools that are you choose keywords, and that tool was searching for those keywords across like Twitter, all sorts of forums, etc. So you were getting just a report with the conversations on Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever, and then you can just see, all right, is that interesting? Should we reply or not?
We do get a Google alert every time someone mentions Jira reporting anywhere on the internet.
I would add kind of even a lower hanging fruit of the same concept, right? Is that we have RSS feeds set up from the Atlassian community for any keywords that our apps are relevant for. And to Shannon's point, right? Sometimes we go in there and someone was like, oh, we want to do X with email. And we're like, well, you can do X in email natively. You can also do a better job of that if you use our app. And the volume is all over the place and the signal to noise ratio isn't amazing, but it's also, I would put it this way. The volume is low enough that I do it on my phone, like in transit, and it doesn't really impact me in any kind of meaningful way 99% of the time. And in terms of signal to noise ratio, I would say like 1 out of 20 items that I read are actually relevant. And unfortunately for us, the keyword is email. So anytime one of you guys puts the word email us at, that comes up in my RSS feed. But, word like, various keywords like Chris mentioned, Jira reporting, et cetera, that may be more relevant to your brands, may give you a higher signal to noise ratio than us.
I think next April 1st, we all know what to do to have Boris.
So on the topic,
just everyone spam email.
On the topic of like, communicating with customers and appropriate tools and signal to noise ratio, we had the chat widget, like a drift.com chat widget on our site. And I would say 80% of the use was other community, like Atlassian vendors and solutions partners trolling me. And 20% was people asking for general Jira support because Atlassian doesn't have a chat widget. And people were like, can you help me run my Jira? I'm like, no one person in India that like you are not an admin or anything. Like, so yeah, finding the right channel is always important.
In the words of Shaggy, it wasn't me trolling you, Boris, honest. All right, guys, well, that about wraps us up. We've got 5 minutes left. So if anyone has any suggestions for a topic next month, I'm all ears. Is there any other sort of headaches or things people would like to, discuss further next month?
I don't know if this has ever been brought up before, but has anybody done a product hunt launch for any of their apps?
I've seen a number of them done. Never done one myself. I've seen a few done fairly successfully in terms of the number of upvotes, but my gut feel in seeing that is that someone went out and bought a bunch of upvotes and bought a bunch of comments on it. It seems super disingenuous. And in general, I find that like when I browse Product Hunt as a consumer, my perspective on it is like, hey, this is like marketing spam for interesting ideas that I should like find. Like, oh, here's a cool note-taking idea app. Now forget that app. Let's go research more interesting things about note-taking from serious sources.
Yeah, no, I only say it because we're considering it for one of our apps and didn't know if anybody had experience there.
Yeah, a Product Hunt, I think, was one of those sites that when I was doing SEO, backlink, spamathons, I wrote some links on, but no, never. I think I did 200 pages in 1 week and then never looked at them again. And unfortunately, some of them you have to give your phone number. And I get a lot of calls from India these days. That's interesting.
All right, well then not enough for a whole topic, but if anybody
maybe
has
just
ping me.
product launching could be a wider topic, maybe more interesting.
It's a bit broad.
You know, I don't know how tight of a definition of the word marketing this group wants to use. But I think pricing typically falls within the scope of marketing. I started a little shit show in the TAM Slack for those who have access to it by calling out Atlassian. So the recommended pricing for cloud apps right now at the 10,000 user tier is that we should charge 0.7% per user of what Atlassian charges. And I was like, wow, we're not even worth 1% of what Jira is. That seems fairly insulting. You know, they were harping on pricing on yesterday's call, which is what kind of brought that out. So if you guys consider pricing within the scope of marketing, I think that could be one of the things to discuss. I think that there's a lot of books on pricing and there's not a good approach that anyone settled on.
So I don't know how it is in America, but in Europe, you can get in quite a lot of trouble meeting with your competitors in a space and discussing what pricing we should all agree to set.
No, I don't. It's definitely like there's anti-collusion laws in the United States. I don't think that's a question. I think the large majority here are not competitors. And even if, you know, like technically OSS competes with AlphaServe in some way, right? Like, but even that's pretty loosey-goosey. Beyond that, I think that at least in the US, the way it's defined is usually on like, you can't set prices, right? But we can talk about the mechanisms that we use to set prices.
The philosophies, the equations.
Yeah, the philosophies, the general things that we put into it, you know, like, are you doing cost-based pricing? Are you doing value pricing? Like, why have you chosen one to be more important than the other? Like, what are the factors that you consider? Like, maybe I'm not thinking about, you know, something like, you know, OSS has I forget which country, but like you have operational costs that are based out of an Eastern European country, which are significantly lower than like my costs based out of the US, right? Like, how does that factor into your plan? Like, I know that like OSS, for example, has a much more aggressive sales motion, right? We have no sales motion whatsoever, right? Like, we have support, we have dev, we have like some degree of market. So anyways, my point is simply that like, I think that there's a lot of interesting factors to think about there, and without being like, hey, let's all agree to charge, you know, 10 cents per user.
I'm willing to risk it. I don't know whether I'll upload the video. I'll put it that way. Yes. Is there anything else? We're short on time, so we can discuss pricing strategies. I'm definitely interested in, I don't give away apps for free, and I'll talk about why But yeah, so we can talk about pricing strategies in general. Is there anything else that people want to discuss next month? What's grinding your gears in the marketplace marketing world?
Atlassian. It's always Atlassian.
Well, that just becomes a therapy session now. If we all just sit around bitching about Atlassian.
Yeah, we should have that as well. A venting and gossip session.
But you're not allowed to record that.
That's no fair enough. That's fine. So, okay. If anyone else thinks of anything else they'd like to discuss next month, you don't have to answer now. The Slack room is always there, so feel free to ping the marketing room. Thank you all very much for joining, and for those that contributed. If anyone has any ideas or questions to discuss for next month's meetup, let me know. And have an excellent month, everyone.
Yeah,
Right,
thank you,
thanks.
Chris. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Take care.